The night was calm, the only sounds coming from the crackling campfire and the soft rustling of leaves in the towering trees. A group of campers sat around the fire, sharing stories and laughter, enjoying their escape into the wilderness. The scent of freshly cooked food lingered in the air, mixing with the cool, crisp breeze of the forest. It was supposed to be a perfect night, but then a noise. A sharp rustling in the bushes just beyond the light of the fire made everyone freeze. Jake, one of the campers, turned his head toward the sound, his heart pounding slightly. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. The others exchanged uneasy glances, their laughter dying down. Before anyone could react, a large shadow moved near their food stash. The firelight flickered, revealing the unmistakable shape of a bear, its powerful body shifting as it rummaged through their supplies. Panic surged through the group. They had heard of bears stealing food from campsites, but seeing it happen right in front of them was a different experience entirely. The campers sat frozen, their breaths shallow, knowing that any sudden movement could startle the bear. The bear focused on its prize, grabbed a bag of food in its massive jaws. In a matter of seconds, it turned and disappeared into the dark forest, leaving only scattered wrappers and overturned bags in its wake. The group exhaled in a mix of relief and shock. "Well, there goes our breakfast," Lisa muttered, trying to ease the tension. Everyone laughed nervously, but something felt odd. It wasn't just that the bear had stolen their food, it was how deliberate it seemed. The way it had moved, how quickly it had grabbed what it wanted and left, almost as if it had done this before. What they didn't realize was that this wasn't just an ordinary food theft. The real mystery would come the next morning, when they discovered what the bear had left behind. The next morning, the campers woke up groggy but eager to investigate the aftermath of the night's unexpected visitor. The campsite was a mess. Food wrappers scattered, a cooler knocked over, and footprints embedded in the soft earth. "What a disaster," Jake muttered, rubbing his eyes as he inspected the damage. That bear really made itself at home. As Lisa bent down to pick up some trash near the edge of the clearing, she suddenly froze. "Guys, you need to see this." The group gathered around her, their curiosity growing as she pointed to a strange pile of small rocks and sticks stacked neatly near their tent. The placement was deliberate, too perfect to be random. The campers exchanged confused glances. "You think the bear did this?" Priya asked skeptically. "Maybe it's just how the wind blew them," Jake suggested, though he didn't sound convinced. But that wasn't the only odd thing. Near the fire pit, someone or something had placed a single half-eaten fish, as if left behind on purpose. "That wasn't here last night," Lisa said, a chill running down her spine. "The bear stole our food, but did it also leave something behind?" The group debated for a while. Was it a coincidence? A strange habit of this particular bear? Or was something else going on? That night, curiosity got the better of them. They decided to stay awake and watch the campsite closely, hoping to catch a glimpse of the bear if it returned. As the fire crackled and the hours passed, the forest seemed eerily quiet. Just when they were about to give up, a familiar rustling came from the trees. The bear was back. But instead of heading straight for the food, it walked toward the same spot where the pile of rocks had been and carefully placed something on the ground. The campers held their breath, watching in stunned silence. The bear lingered for a moment, as if considering its actions, then turned and disappeared into the woods. When they rushed over to see what it had left behind, they were completely shocked. The campers rushed toward the spot where the bear had stopped, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Their breaths were shallow, their hearts pounding with anticipation. Jake knelt down first, hesitating before reaching toward the ground. The others gathered around, their eyes widening as the flashlight beam illuminated the object the bear had left behind. It wasn't food. It wasn't a random pile of rocks like before. Lying in the dirt was a smooth, round stone, but not just any stone. It had strange scratches and markings on it, almost as if someone or something had deliberately etched them into the surface. "What is this?" Priya whispered, running her fingers over the grooves. Lisa exhaled sharply. This can't be a coincidence. First, the stacked rocks, then the fish, and now this. She looked up at the dark forest where the bear had disappeared. It's like it's trying to communicate. The realization sent a shiver through the group. This wasn't normal bear behavior. They had expected it to return for more food, maybe to scavenge again. But instead, it had left something behind. Determined to understand what was happening, Jake suggested setting up a hidden camera near their supplies before going to sleep. If this bear is really doing something intentional, we need to see it with our own eyes, he reasoned. The group agreed, carefully placing a small camera near the spot where the bear had left the stone, pointing it toward their campfire and food area. That night, as they lay in their tents, they could hardly sleep. Every crack of a branch, every rustle of the leaves had them on edge, waiting for the bear to return. And then it did. At around 2 a.m., a faint rustling in the trees made Lisa sit up. She nudged Jake, who quickly unzipped the tent just enough to peek outside. There it was. The bear emerged from the shadows, its dark fur barely visible against the trees. But instead of going for the food, it walked directly to the same spot near the stacked stones. The campers watched in awe as the bear gently placed something new on the ground. It nudged the object with its nose, then stood still for several moments, almost as if waiting. Then, without taking a single bite of the food left outside, the bear turned and vanished once more into the night. The campers sat frozen, their minds racing. "What the hell did we just witness?" Jake finally whispered. The next morning, they rushed to check the camera footage and see what the bear had left behind. What they found would change everything. As soon as the sun peeked over the treetops, the campers scrambled out of their tents, eager to see what the bear had left behind this time. Their hands trembled slightly as they brushed away the dirt around the mysterious object. Lying in the same spot as before was something completely unexpected. A rusted metal tag, worn and weathered by time, with faint markings on its surface. It looked old, too old to have simply been picked up by chance. Priya carefully turned it over, squinting at the faded engravings. "There's something written on it," she murmured. Jake wiped off some dirt and held it closer to the light. The letters were hard to make out, but after a moment, he read aloud, "Wildlife Research Project, 1987. A chill ran through the group. This must have belonged to a collared bear," Lisa whispered. "Maybe even its mother." The realization struck them all at once. Was the bear deliberately bringing them this tag as some sort of message? Could it be connected to a long-lost wildlife study? They rushed to check the camera footage, huddling around Jake's laptop as the video played. The grainy night vision captured everything. The bear's approach, its slow and careful placement of the object, and then a brief moment where it paused and looked directly at their tent as if waiting for a response. The campsite fell into silence as they processed what they had just seen. "Guys," Priya said slowly, her voice filled with awe. "I don't think this bear is just looking for food." Lisa nodded, still staring at the tag in her hands. "What if it remembers something? What if it's trying to tell us something?" Determined to get answers, they decided to dig deeper. The bear's behavior wasn't random, it was methodical, intelligent, even intentional. The question now was, what did it want them to understand? And more importantly, would it return again? The weight of the discovery sat heavily on the campers. The rusted wildlife research tag wasn't just some random object. The bear had brought it to them for a reason. But what reason? And how could an animal possibly remember something from decades ago? Lisa turned the tag over in her hands, deep in thought. If this bear is connected to a past study, then maybe it remembers humans from when it was a cub. Maybe it's associating us with something. Jake rubbed his face, still trying to wrap his head around it. "It's been leaving things for us. What if it's trying to trade?" The idea sent a shiver down Priya's spine. "Trade," she repeated. Jake nodded. "Look at the pattern. It started by taking our food, but then it left behind fish bones, then the stacked stones, then this." He gestured to the rusted tag. "What if it's testing us, seeing if we'll understand?" A moment of silence settled over the group before Lisa spoke. "Then let's test it back." Determined to see if the bear's behavior was truly intentional, the campers devised a plan. That night, instead of leaving out just food, they placed two objects beside the food. A small pile of berries and nuts, something the bear might want. A shiny metal compass, to see if the bear would take an object instead of food. They positioned the camera carefully and then sat by the fire, waiting for the bear's return. The night dragged on, the air thick with anticipation. Every rustle of leaves made them tense. Then, just past 2:30 a.m., a familiar sound reached their ears, the low, deliberate crunch of heavy paws stepping through the brush. The bear was back. The campers barely breathed as the bear stepped into the clearing. It didn't lunge for the food this time. Instead, it approached the items carefully, sniffing them. Then, something astonishing happened. The bear ignored the food. It nudged the metal compass with its nose, tilting its head as if considering it. Then, with deliberate movements, it picked up the compass in its mouth and placed something else down in its place. A smooth river stone, slightly different from the last one, with even more strange markings scratched onto it. The campers watched in absolute shock. The bear, satisfied with the exchange, took one last look at them and then disappeared into the forest. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Lisa, barely able to form words, whispered, Did we just trade with a bear?" The next morning, they examined the new stone under better light. The markings were more distinct, not random scratches, but deliberate etchings. It looked eerily similar to old tracking symbols used by researchers. Lisa's hands trembled. "If this bear is leaving us these markings, it means something. We need to find out what." But before they could even begin solving that mystery, one thing was clear. This bear wasn't just stealing food, it was communicating, and the true mystery was only just beginning. The next morning, they examined the new stone under better light. The markings were more distinct. Not random scratches, but deliberate etchings. It looked eerily similar to old tracking symbols used by researchers. Lisa's hands trembled. "If this bear is leaving us these markings, it means something. We need to find out what." But before they could even begin solving that mystery, one thing was clear. This bear wasn't just stealing food. It was communicating. And the true mystery was only just beginning. The morning after the final exchange, the campers sat in a tight circle, the etched stone resting in the center like an unsolved riddle. The events of the past few nights felt surreal. A bear had not only traded with them, but seemed to be trying to communicate something deeper. Lisa traced the markings on the stone with her fingertips, her mind racing. "I still can't believe what we saw. This wasn't just some random bear behavior. It wasn't instinct. It was thought out." Jake nodded. "It ignored the food. It chose the object. That's not normal animal behavior. That's intelligence." Priya, who had remained quiet, finally spoke. "I don't think we just met a bear." She looked up at the others, her expression unreadable. "I think we met a story, a living piece of history." The group fell into silence, letting her words sink in. They began piecing together what they had experienced. The rusted research tag suggested that this bear, or perhaps its mother, had once been part of a wildlife study decades ago. The stacked rocks and stones weren't random, they were patterns, almost as if the bear was mimicking something it had once seen. The decision to trade an object rather than steal food suggested it remembered human interaction. Lisa pulled out her phone and did a quick search. "Look at this," she said, showing them an old wildlife research archive. Decades ago, in this very region, scientists had worked with bears to track their behavior. Some of them were trained to recognize signals, marks on stones, even basic exchanges. Jake let out a slow breath. So, what if this bear isn't just a random scavenger? What if it's the offspring of a trained bear? Priya finished, her voice filled with awe. The fear they had first felt about the bear was gone. In its place was awe, respect, and a burning curiosity. "We spent the first night scared it would hurt us," Lisa mused. "And now, I don't think it ever meant to scare us at all." The thought was humbling. They had assumed the bear was just like any other wild animal, driven by hunger, instinct, and survival. But instead, it had shown patience, intelligence, and even trust. Priya shook her head in amazement. "People always talk about how we study animals, but what if, all this time, some of them have been studying us too?" The weight of the thought lingered. Had the bear been watching humans for years? Had it learned from them? Had it waited for the right moment to show what? As they packed up their campsite, they made one final decision. They wouldn't take the stone with them. Instead, they left it exactly where the bear had placed it, along with a new object in return. A small, shiny keychain with a bright red tag. "If it comes back," Lisa said with a grin, "let's see if it leaves us another message." As they hiked away from the site, they turned back one last time, staring into the dense, quiet forest. Somewhere in the trees, the bear was still out there, watching, remembering, maybe even waiting. But one thing was certain: they would never look at the wild the same way again. The bear had stolen their food, but what it left behind was something far more valuable, a mystery that would stay with them forever.